Hi, and welcome back to the Britt Mayer Show. Today I am joined with my friend Katy Faust. I have been watching her for years from afar, but I am so excited to have her finally sit down with us to just have a very honest and raw conversation about the wild, wild west that is IVF. And we're just going to go straight into it. I really want her to just be able to be raw and unfiltered because that's what this show is about. And I would encourage you that if you feel at any point like you're getting offended or defensive, to stick it out through the end. This is going to be a really important conversation that not a lot of people are having right now. So I want to welcome and invite you in. Katy Faust, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, so this is an absolute delight. And when I saw on my calendar that I was going to be on the Britt Mayer Show, I'm like, who's Britt? How do I know Britt? And then I looked you up, I'm like, oh my gosh, Rooted Wings, I love her so much. And it's like somehow I didn't quite make the connection that the girl on Twitter that I'm like, oh, fire, oh my gosh, I love it. Like you have a show and your name is Britt.
So
anyway, thank you. Like the two worlds of like the real life world and the Twitter world collide. And so I'm very grateful. I'm a big fan. You're a very good follow. I'm not on a lot of social media, but if you guys are on X, Rooted Wings is the place to go.
Thank you for that, Katy. Well, why don't you just start with sharing who you are and how you got into really being at the helm of the ship when it comes to this conversation of IVF.
It didn't begin with IVF. I didn't know a whole lot about IVF. I didn't know a lot about reproductive technologies at all. And I actually was not interested in being in the culture war because I like keeping my friends. On the truth teller, grace giver spectrum, I am the grace giver. I just want peace. But it was honestly in the gay marriage debate that I thought, okay, this is a line too far. What I saw in that conversation was the weaponization of children's greatest pain and losses to advance a political aim, to advance a cultural narrative. Specifically, that kids don't care if they have two moms or two dads, which functionally means kids don't care that they've lost their mom or dad. And I have had an awful lot of up close and personal experience with kids, whether it's 3 decades of work in youth ministry, whether it's the former assistant director of the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world, whether it's the mom of 3 biological kids and 1 adopted kid, and obviously, working with other moms with kids. And my husband, also the product of divorce. I'm a product of divorce. He was a pastor at our church for, 14 years, senior pastor for 14 years. We've done lots of marriage counseling. We've done lots of counseling of people who grew up in fragmented homes. That you can mess with a child's childhood and that they're going to be just fine, or they're resilient, or loves makes a family, or whatever. It's all just different band-aids. It's all just different permission slips for adults to do whatever they want and for the kids to shoulder the load. So I got into this because I feel a burning drive to represent the rights and well-being of children in these cultural conversations that whether you're talking about the definition of marriage or divorce or IVF or reproductive technologies are dominated by adults. Adult longing, adult losses, adult identity, adult feelings. And it's always the kids that suffer. When we get these questions wrong, it is the children whose physical, mental, emotional, academic, and relational health are diminished. So your caution to your listeners is probably correct, that they might feel triggered or offended at some point. But that is actually the nature of putting children first. It will require that adults sacrifice, because the only alternative is for us to put adults first and for the kids to sacrifice. And that is a worldview characterized by injustice. So if I am doing my job well on this podcast, my primary concern is not going to be for the adult listeners to feel good. It is going to be for the children, every child, to have their fundamental rights and well-being and interests well represented on this podcast.
So good. Well, with that as the foundation, we've kind of mentioned how the IVF situation now is the modern day wild, wild west. I want you to just sit there for a second and explain what that actually means, because I know for me personally, this came up. I'll actually be honest with you. The first time I actually really stopped to consider IVF, my daughter was a baby and I was at swim lessons with her in the pool. And I was chatting with another mom who also had her baby. So our daughters were just, a year old. So we're both bouncing our babies, talking. You swap stories, right? Of birth stories and all of that, family planning. Are you going to have, you go deep fast in a swimming pool when you have a toddler on your hip. And as we were talking, she just really openly said, "Oh, well, we're not sure if we're going to have any more, but we currently have 4 more on ice." And I said, I was so confused. I was like, you have 4 more on ice? She said, "Oh, well, this, our baby was IVF. We waited a little long to start having babies. And so we're not really sure what we're going to do." And I just remember in that moment being so struck with the reality that here you are tangibly holding a human baby that's only a year past the point of all those other frozen little babies on ice. And you're just casually saying, "We don't know what we're going to do with the other ones. We might, just decide not to do anything." And that really was, over a decade ago, what made me start thinking about what is this? But I have found the more conversations I have, even with Christians or family, there are such polarizing views on it. So I want to just sit in the wild, wild west arena. What makes IVF the wild, wild west?
Well, first of all, like that tension that you acknowledge of this is hard to talk about. It is hard to talk about because adults have strong feelings. And those strong feelings tend to run the table when we have these kinds of conversations. If adult feeling is in the driver's seat, then I'll tell you what, we are going to get all manner of child victimization. And we do. And we are. And that's exactly what's going on. But if we look at reproductive technologies, IVF, sperm and egg donation, and surrogacy through the lens of children's fundamental natural rights, their right to life, and the right to be known and loved by their mother and father, it becomes very clear. Maybe hard to stomach, but incredibly clear. So I'm going to talk about what IVF is from the perspective of the child. And there are lots of perspectives that you can read anywhere and everywhere, from every celebrity magazine to every puff piece in the New York Times to the different sob stories of friends that are posting their IVF journeys, or the 2 gay men who are desperately seeking a surrogate in a Facebook marketplace group, or whatever it is. The adult perspective is everywhere. I'm going to give you the child's perspective because I actually think, especially if you consider yourself a Christian, your aims, your goal, your primary duty is not empathy for adults. It is child protection. And while this is a new arena, something that is somewhat novel when it comes to the human experience, just like every other Christian throughout every other age, your focus has to be fundamental child protection. That goes part and parcel with the Christian life. So IVF from the child's perspective is an industry that is actually responsible for the death of more children every year than Planned Parenthood. As I tweeted this morning, you kind of tagged me in a clip of a dad who was talking about how they had 12 embryos and they're like, "Okay, we're going to implant the first embryo, whatever embryo it is, if it's a boy or a girl, that's the one we're going to implant." And he said, "I really wanted a boy, but my wife really wanted a girl. So the first one was a girl."
Yeah,
And then the
he
second one.
and to drill down on that, he was talking about which one ranks the highest in
Yes,
health and sustainability. So there's like
right.
this blue ribbon system. So he was
That's
saying,
exactly
"Oh,
right.
but the first one that the doctor says is the most viable, the most healthy and robust is a girl." And then
Yeah.
like he had this look on his face that was like, I was just, it's a girl. Okay, well, let's go for number 2. So go ahead, take it from there.
Yeah. So the second one was a girl. Oh, bummer. The third one was a boy. And I think that I appreciate actually that this clip went so far so fast. I saw a lot of people sharing it because it does speak to the fundamental realities of big fertility. We talk about big pharma. We talk about, all the different industrial complexes. Big fertility is a complex. It is an industrial. This is not a benevolent nonprofit. This is not an adoption agency. This is a for-profit organization. And this for-profit industry is built upon not helping people have babies. It is built upon the grading, selecting, destruction of, donating to research, small little lives. And so that was actually a pretty good lesson in the way IVF works. You create 12. You grade them based on fitness, not just which ones could survive, but what are the fitness? They grade them A, B, C, and D. And then the ones that make the grade, they might implant, they might freeze. The ones that don't make the grade, they're going to donate to research, they're going to discard. And so right from there, you see, they did end up getting one child. And, the happy story is she said that he could have his boy, even though he was the 3rd highest rank as opposed to the 1st or 2nd.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you go, okay, look, they had 12 babies. If you believe that children have a right to life from the moment of conception, 11 children died. So the one child could have a chance at life. So it's actually pretty illustrative of the way that big fertility functions. And I go around and I speak to I mean, at this point, thousands and thousands of different organizations, largely audiences that lean pro-life, and they're stunned when I tell them that big fertility destroys more embryonic life every year than abortion does. I mean, if you really believe children have a right to life, it is big fertility that is the number one culprit. And that is because in abortion, there's typically only one child's life at stake. In big fertility, they encourage you to create many more embryos than you would ever intend to parent or even implant. Why? Because they actually want to be able to grade and select and screen the babies that are being implanted. So there is a bougie fertility clinic in Beverly Hills, and they admit that 90% of their clientele, not infertile. It's just 90% that want to be able to make children in a laboratory so they can screen out undesirable characteristics. They can do all of the pre-implantation screening for genuine, genetic issues, but also superficial things like eye color. In fact, the doctor says, we can not only guarantee you a child with blue eyes, we can actually select among a variety of 5 different kinds of blue eyes. Now, let's be very clear. They are not making children with blue eyes. They're making 20 children and eliminating the kids that do not have the exact shade of blue eyes that you want. This is how big fertility works. This is why after the Dobbs decision, after the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe versus Wade, you had a virtual panic among fertility doctors in red states that had trigger laws that said, hey, if Roe versus Wade ever gets overturned, we are going to have a trigger law that says children have a right to life from the moment of conception. And all of these fertility doctors said, we won't be able to do business in this state if we define life as beginning at conception. Why? Because their entire business model is built upon creating, designing, discarding, destroying many, many more little lives than anybody would ever want to implant. So unfortunately, we need to get over this narrative that IVF is about infertile couples wanting to have babies.
Yeah, and I think that process part is the understanding the process is so important, because I think sometimes it's easy to look at the end result. Like the end result is it's a happy family. Everyone got what they wanted. There's a mom and a dad, or there are 2 dads that somehow can do it without mom. Their moms aren't needed, or there are 2 moms and dad's not needed. But the baby's, everyone's happy. Yay, it's the modern American family, which I want you to get into that aspect, and even going into the cellular level that's imprinted on children who are denied a mother or a father. Even in sweet redemptive adoption stories, there's still on a cellular level a marking of that loss. But I think that the process is so important, because really when you describe it, it's a process of eugenics. I mean, how can we look at it any different, that we are actually saying we're going to not only manufacture and churn out human beings, which has its own set of ethical concerns, but then we're going to go in and we will select the ones that are best fit.
That's right.
And then the rest are, they're just deemed not good enough. That is eugenics 101.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. What is going on, you have accurately described as a wild west. There are some states, especially regarding surrogacy, that have just virtually, it's just the most sickening kind of marketplace in children that you're ever going to find when it comes to like foreign buyers. Of course, this is always a story of the rich buying and the poor selling. We've got children being trafficked across borders in ways that's completely indistinguishable from baby buying. What's going on specifically in California is close to 50% of their surrogates are foreign nationals. The vast majority are from China.
Whoa, 40%. Wait. Okay. Go back to that, because this is new to me. I know that California just signed the law that now my insurance has to pay for IVF for whoever has insurance in the state of California, which is virtually everyone. But what did you just say about foreign rent-a-wombs? Because honestly, this is brand new to me.
Yeah. So California has allowed for commercial surrogacy for, I would say, since 2015, 2016. Anybody can come in and purchase a child in California. They can rent the womb of a woman in California, or somebody that touches grass in California. Then it can be a legitimate California surrogacy contract. Foreign nationals come to California because surrogacy is banned throughout most of the world, because many countries recognize that it is a form of commodification of women and children. But in California, in the name of sexual autonomy, sexual freedom, progressivism, LGBTQ equality, you have commercial surrogacy. The buyers tend to overwhelmingly be foreign, and because of its proximity to China and its loose regulation, a vast majority, I would say close to 50% of the foreign buyers are Chinese. Now, these Chinese nationals, very often they don't even come to the United States. They'll have some kind of agency worker that will monitor the child and then fly the child back. There's several problems with this. Number one, that baby is a US citizen because they were born here. And
Right.
now the Chinese nationals have a foothold in terms of immigration. But I will tell
Oh
you
my
the
gosh.
biggest problem with that is about 40% of the people commissioning surrogate born children that are Chinese in California are single men over the age of 40. So, yeah.
What the heck is going
That,
on? And
what's
why
going
is
on?
no one talking about this? That is child trafficking. So now
That's
we're
exactly
dealing not only with eugenics, but we're also dealing with child trafficking to China. To China.
that. Well, and not just to China, it's happening everywhere. I mean, Mexico has a thriving surrogacy market because you can get surrogates, it's sort of bottom basement surrogate prices in Mexico, looser regulations, not as much
Oh
high control
my gosh. Katie,
start
where
eating or
do the kids go? So they're, because obviously I'm in shock right now. You and I did not prepare this part. So you got these foreign Chinese men that come over and rent an American womb in California. It's a California baby, human,
Mhm.
that then is shipped to China. So you have an American citizen infant that's being
Yep.
shipped to a Chinese man.
Yep.
Then what?
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if they were, known to social workers, or if, for example, they
Oh
had
my gosh.
or background check? So one really good way to understand why what's going on in the world of big fertility is so egregious is by comparing it to the best practice of adoption. Adoption is by no means perfect, but I will tell you that we have had decades to develop best practice around adoption. And there are a lot of things that we've learned in terms of adoption that would be very useful and helpful if we wanted to actually ensure and elevate child well-being, the best interest of the child in big fertility. Nobody's doing that. So what are some of the problems going on with big fertility? Number one, when I was at the adoption agency back when I was sort of young and green and idealistic, I remember telling my founder, I said, there's this one couple, I'm trying to get them approved, but boy, there's been a lot of red flags and we've had a lot of road bumps, but I'm going to get them approved. Don't worry. And she said, you misunderstand. We're not here to approve the adults. We're not here to give every adult that wants a baby a baby. We are here to provide loving parents with every child who has lost them. The adults might be paying us, but the child is the client.
Wow.
When adoption is done right, every baby that needs a home is going to be placed in a vetted and screened and loving home by parents who, as much as we can, are going to do their best to raise the child as if the baby had been born to them. The child is the client. In big fertility, the adults are the client, whether they are heterosexual or homosexual, single or double or triple, men or women. The goal is to get those adults a baby, regardless of the cost to any other children, regardless to the cost to that child. In adoption, the adults do hard things on behalf of the children. Adoptive parents like me and like many of your listeners understand what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You went through months of screening and vetting and background checks and home studies, references, post-placement reports, training, because social workers are not fools. They understand that just because we say we intend to parent a child, that does not provide the same level of safeguards to bring an unrelated child into our home. In big fertility, the children do hard things on behalf of adults. They literally will lose their life. They will lose their right to their mother or father, and they will be placed with people who have no kinds of screening or vetting or background check, even though they may be completely unrelated to the child. And I'll tell you, here's the other thing that I think makes it very, very clear that this is not about helping people have babies. This is a marketplace of children. In adoption, one of the things I was responsible for at the adoption agencies was compliance with international, federal, and state level protocols. And a lot of those centered around the reality that money could never go from the intended parents to the birth mother, or from the prospective adoptive parents to the first family. If, for example, some of the money that my husband and I paid for the adoption process went directly to my son's birth mother, who we don't know because it was because children in China are abandoned without any identifying information. But if for some reason we had paid her $5,000, it would no longer be a legitimate adoption. They would say, you are trafficking that child. You are paying for a woman to relinquish her baby. That's not adoption. That is baby selling.
Hmm.
So big fertility is built on direct payments to genetic parents and birth parents. Nobody is donating sperm. Nobody is donating eggs. And very few women will altruistically serve as surrogates. Everybody is buying and everyone is selling. You are paying for a sperm donor to relinquish his parental rights. You are paying to purchase eggs with the understanding that that woman will never try to be the mother of the child. You are paying for the surrogate to sign a pre-birth registration saying, I renounce my parenthood, my motherhood to this child before they're even born. What is going on in big fertility is categorically child trafficking, according to the 4 decades that we have of adoption best practice. So when you say Wild West, it is. It's not just a Wild West. It is actually the inverse of everything that we have learned about child protection in the world of adoption.
When you put it like that, it's sobering. I can't get over, yes, it's actually really scary, because I feel like the train has not only left the station, but it's gaining speed. And we're seeing high ranking politicians in the conservative circles that you and I both know are making really poor decisions with their promises when it comes to IVF to the American people. And it makes me really sick and angry, because I want to shake everyone and say, what are we doing here? Why is no one drilling down on these important conversations like you and I are having right now, to say we're talking about eugenics and child trafficking, and we're wrapping it up in pretty wrapping paper and making it look like it's an altruistic thing, but it's very dark. And there's a lot of loopholes where kids can be very, very, very hurt. Where in the world do we go from here, Katy Faust?
Well, let me pick up on what we're talking about with the commercial surrogacy. That's actually kind of old news. California's been doing that for probably close to a decade. What is new is the thing that you just brought up, where Gavin Newsom didn't just say, hey, we can do commercial surrogacy. He redefined infertility. Mm-hmm. He actually redefined what fertility and infertility services include. It used to be 6 to 12 months of unprotected heterosexual sex that didn't result in a pregnancy or live birth. But now, infertility is somebody who is single. Infertility is somebody, 2 men or 2 women that cannot get pregnant no matter how much intercourse they have.
That's right.
So what happens when you subsidize IVF for somebody who is single or someone in a same-sex couple? From the child's perspective, what you're doing is you are manufacturing orphans. You are manufacturing motherless and fatherless children. When you redefine infertility, what you're saying is this adult's desire for a child, some kind of biological connection to a child, is more important than the child's fundamental right to be known and loved by their biological parent. What you're saying is their desire to have a baby is more important than that baby's right to be raised in a home that is statistically the one that is going to provide them with the most love, safety, care, and their biological identity. When you redefine infertility, what you're saying is we endorse identity struggles that the children who are created through third parties overwhelmingly deal with. And we are endorsing what you said before, actually almost a cellular modification of the child. Like, we don't have a whole lot of data at this point on how children's physical bodies are impacted when a third party is used to create them. But we do know the incredible harms of father loss through conventional means. And what you were talking about earlier is there was a study done in 2017 on the cellular impact of father loss, where they looked at children, young boys and young girls, whose father was absent due to death, incarceration, or divorce. And what they saw was the end caps of the child's chromosomes, the telomeres, were shortened through that father loss. What are telomeres for? Well, it just determines your lifespan and your overall health. I mean, when you talk about messing with children and their connection to their mother and father, you are altering their bodies at a cellular level. So congratulations. Adult desire, their identity, their unwillingness to partner with somebody of the opposite sex, whether it's because of an identity issue or just it's inconvenient or this is how I want to live, that's fine. You're just doing it on the backs of, the lives and well-being and rights and longevity of children. Mm-hmm. And That infuriates me. It
Yeah.
infuriates.
Well, it should, even if for people who aren't Christians, it should infuriate them. I hope that this is like a gallon of cold ice water splashed onto our faces, because we need to wake up to the reality of the devil is in the details in all of this. One of the pushbacks I get, Katy, even when I've talked to family, we were out in Sedona a few months ago, and this became a heavy conversation around the fireplace. I'm going to send this to all my family now because they'll remember. People were sweating. It was like a long conversation about the pushback being, well, what about families who you've got a loving mom and dad, husband and wife, and there's an infertility issue and they want a child of their own. And so is it wrong? Is it unethical for them to seek out IVF? What if it's dad's sperm, mom's egg combined? They're going to make 3 babies and they're going to implant all 3 and take on all the risks. Is that bad? Is it unethical? Is there still any dark corners that we need to expose on that? Or is that okay?
Yeah. That is obviously the question that a lot of people pose, but what about this very narrow possibility of doing it in ways that don't violate any child's right to life or right to their mother and father? And while that's technically possible, any person that's gone through IVF will tell you, not only is it cost prohibitive, but your doctor will probably advise you against it. I mean, if you're going to spend $10,000 to $20,000 on a round of IVF, I mean, you don't want just 3 babies, because I'll tell you what, the failure rates are pretty high. You want 6, you want 9, you want 12, so that when the first 2 or 3 rounds of multiples, well, like twins that you've implanted, fail, you want to be able to go back and get the other ones right away. You don't want to have to go through the process of recreating the embryos again. Further, if you develop 12, then you will be able to grade them and figure out which ones are the most viable or the ones that make the grade. I mean, those other 6, I mean, they're really going to dampen your chances anyway. And one of the very few things that fertility clinics do have to report is their live birth rates. What is their success rates? And so you choosing to take this path of actually implanting all the embryos, not creating excess embryos, not doing any kind of grading or selecting, it's going to be bad for the clinic because it's not going to be as successful and you are going to tank their numbers. So I've now talked to thousands and thousands of people across the country in podcast form, on conference form. So far, I've known and been alerted to six couples who have used IVF who didn't destroy any child's right to life, any child's right to their mother and father. That means they did not freeze any children.
Wow.
Because if you freeze the babies, most of the time, those babies do not, at least all of them, do not emerge from the freezer. And all 6 of these people were rich. The truth is, it is cost prohibitive to do this in a way that honors children's right to life and right to their mother and father. That is why so few people do it. So from a children's rights perspective, it is possible to pursue IVF without destroying any child's right to life or right to their mother and father. It's just cost prohibitive, it's improbable, and your doctor isn't going to like it.
So then what do we do with this place that we find ourselves, this part of the story where we are seeing, like I said earlier, the train taken off out of the station and it's gaining speed and it almost feels like it's out of control now. You know, we're having policies put in place where I have to pay for other people to gain access to child trafficking and eugenics, and I have no idea what's being really done there, what's happening to all the babies who are discarded. You know, you mentioned that research, what kind of research, like it all just really seems dark and murky, but it also seems like it's going so fast. So with all of that, with this wild, wild west that we're living in, what do we do from here as Christians, but also as maybe you have Gnostics and atheists or people of other faiths who recognize that this is human rights violations? What is our role in this part of the story?
You have to decide. The question is it us or is it them? That's it. Who's going to be ultimately protected? Whose rights, desires, longings are going to be elevated to the primary role, the primary position, the seat of determination? You have to choose. You can either cater to adults and what they want, or you can protect the rights of children. You can't have both. You're going to have to choose. A just society will say, we're going to choose the kids. We're going to protect their right to life. We're going to protect their right to life from both the baby taking industry of abortion and the baby making industry of IVF. We are going to protect their right to their mother and father from big fertility that separates anywhere from 30 to 60,000 children a year from their mother or father or both. But we're also going to protect children from rampant divorce that separates hundreds of thousands of households a year for things that don't have to do with abuse and adultery and abandonment, but just because adults have fallen out of love.
Mm.
We are going to say we're going to protect children's right to their mother and father, and their need to be raised by both their mother and father is more important than adults' identity or their feelings of same-sex attraction or their feelings of gender confusion. We are going to say that even if you're struggling with infertility, children's right to their mother and father, children's right to life is more important than your desire to have a child. That in all of those situations, I mean, you've probably noticed a trend here. At some point, every adult has to choose. Is it them or is it me? And if you're doing children's rights correctly, every adult at some point is going to have to sacrifice, because the only alternative is for children to sacrifice for adults. That is an injustice, especially if you consider yourself a Christian whose entire biblical corpus is built upon the strong sacrificing for the weak, in specifically charging us with protecting the most vulnerable. There's like 40 verses in the Old Testament about defending the fatherless. That is the way to go. Or if you want to put us before them, what you will have is you will have the manufacturing of the fatherless, the manufacturing of the motherless, the destruction of children's fundamental right to life, and the household that ensures their thriving. You just have to choose, is it us or is it them? And be honest. Most of us at some point will say, well, it should be us. We should be able to have what we want. It's my right. It's my desire. I need this. I want this. I deserve this. That's the narrative that the whole culture is pouring out on you, telling you that you can justify these decisions. I understand it takes a while to get over. Hopefully we will get to the point where we say, no, it shouldn't be us. It should be them, the children. They should be first. We should defend their rights. We should defend their well-being, because child destruction is not a price that should be paid just because an adult wants something. We need to sacrifice for them and not the other way around.
Gosh, dang it, Katy, you're good. I love you. I love you. You're amazing. I am so thankful for your work in this arena, because I really do think that we're late to the game, but you are tip of the spear in this. And I'm so thankful for how intelligent you are and how deep you dig into this and how willing you are to be really the target, of come at me, say all the mean things you want, but I am going to stand for what is truth, and I'm going to speak truth to power. And that is so needed if we're going to save lives. Yes, the pro-life movement focuses a whole lot on the unborn, but this is such an important conversation that we need to table and bring to power, bring into policies, bring into our churches. This podcast, for everyone who made it through, and I hope everyone did, send it to your pastors, to your church staff, to your friends who you're maybe like, I don't know what they think about. Send it anyway. Katy and I both made a decision long ago to cross that bridge of being afraid of what friends, family, and church was going to think of us. And I promise you, it's better on the side that we're standing on. I would not change a thing. And I know Katy would say the same, that being bold in this time and this part of the story is so important. Don't hold back. Don't be a frightened little sheep hiding in the corners, because children's lives are at stake. So Katy, first of all, I want to have you back on again soon, because I just adore you and I am so thankful. And there's so much more that we could have covered in this. But how can people find you and find the good work that you are doing?
Well, thank you for letting me speak to your people. I actually know it's a risk for you to have me on. I know of hosts that are like, yeah, I lost a lot of donors after you were on. So it's costly for everybody. But the only alternative is for children to bear the cost. And that's just not something that
That's
anybody
right.
should be okay with. If this has piqued your interest, our whole first book, Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement, lays this case out with 120 stories of kids who experienced mother or father loss, dozens of footnotes on every chapter that are going to give you the stats and the stories that you need to flesh out this little tip of the iceberg we've discussed. So if you want to become an expert on this, Then Before Us, our first book, is going to make you unassailable. If you are a Christian and you want to try to introduce this into your church context, we actually have a church curriculum that takes that material and boils it down into a 7-part video series that marries our natural law research side of things with biblical truth. And it's free. Just go to thembeforeus.com, resource for churches, sign up, and we will send you the curriculum. Have some friends over in your living room. You won't have to have the hard conversations. I will do it for you.
And you'll do a really good job at it.
Yeah. And then I'm on Twitter too much. But come to thembeforeus.com and subscribe. Like, stay up on our work. There are so many. We've been trying to talk about, like, how do we describe what Them Before Us is and what we're doing? And it's like, I feel like it's like next gen child protection. Child
Yes,
protection
it
from
is. That's a
threat.
great way to phrase it.
Yeah, that we just have never had to face before as humanity. But if we do not get this right, we are sunk. We are tanked. We're cooked. We're cooked if we don't get these things right. So come and follow our work. I would love for you to stay connected to us.
I'm looking at your book right now. I was like, can I reach it? No, I cannot. I cannot reach it. But I'm looking at Them Before Us. And then right next to it is Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. So I love you. I'm a huge fan. And yes, go grab both of those books because it will, I think a big reason why people don't engage in this conversation is because they feel like, I just don't know what to say. Or like I did out in Sedona with my family, where you're like, whoa, we like poked the bear and now I don't know how to calm it all down, but to still hold true to the facts. And your book, Them Before Us, is facts on the ground. And I love that you do the resources for churches. I had no idea. So that, yes, churches, send it to your pastor and your staff so that they can host fun groups on IVF, because it is actually really important. The church should be tip of the spear on all of this.
That's right.
Katy, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have you back again soon. And thank you so much for the good work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to chat.